Imagine a busy home full of siblings, 12 in all. And among them all, there was one young man who stood out. His name was Joseph, the son of Jacob with Rachel, his beloved wife. Joseph was Jacob's second-to-last son, born in his old age, which already made him special in his father's eyes. But there was something more. Joseph wasn't just another son. He was the favorite. Jacob didn't hide his affection. He openly expressed his love for Joseph, something his other sons clearly perceived, and which gradually generated envy and bitterness among his brothers. As a token of this love, Jacob presented Joseph with a long, colorful tunic, something unusual for ancient times. It wasn't just any tunic. It was a rich, royal garment, a clear demonstration that Joseph held a special place in his father's heart. It was as if that tunic said, "This is the son of my dreams. This is the chosen one." Before we continue, make sure you've liked and subscribed to the channel. This way, stories like this will reach more people, and it will also help me a lot. Okay, subscribed? Now let's continue with this wonderful story. Now imagine the atmosphere at home. A young man dressed in noble attire, walking gracefully, while his older brothers did the hard work in the fields. They sweated under the sun, tending the flocks, and Joseph often stayed home, or was sent by his father simply to observe and bring news. Joseph was obedient, upright, and honest. When he saw something wrong among his brothers, he told his father. This, of course, further inflamed the fury in their hearts. Joseph grew up with a heightened spiritual sensitivity, and this would become even more evident in the events that followed. But even then, as a teenager, Joseph's life was being shaped by a mixture of his father's deep love and his brother's dangerous resentment. A storm was gathering on the horizon, and Joseph had no idea how much his life was about to change. Jose was still a young man, just 17 years old, when he began having very strange dreams, and at the same time, fascinating ones. They were vivid, striking dreams, the kind of dreams you never forget when you wake up. But they weren't just ordinary dreams, the kind you have and then pass. No, these dreams carried a prophetic meaning, and Joseph knew it. In the first dream, he saw himself and his brothers in the field, binding sheaves of wheat. Suddenly, the sheaf he had bound rose and stood firm, and his brothers' sheaves bowed before his. It was too clear to be just a nocturnal accident. Joseph was impressed, and without filtering, without thinking about the consequences, he immediately told his brothers about the dream. Just imagine, a young man already seen as Daddy's favorite, now saying that all his brothers would bow before him. Their eyes burned with anger. They already couldn't stand Joseph because of the tunic, because of Jacob's excessive love. Now, this dreamy boy had the audacity to say he would become greater than them all. But Jose didn't stop there. Sometime later, he had another dream. This one was even more shocking. This time he saw the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowing down before him. When he told this second dream, he didn't just speak to his brothers. He also spoke to his father, Jacob. Jacob, an experienced and God-fearing man, was surprised. He even rebuked him lightly, asking, "What is this you have dreamed? Will I, your mother, and your brothers come and bow down to the ground before you?" Even with this rebuke, Jacob kept that dream in his heart, as if knowing that maybe, just maybe, God was behind it. The brothers, on the other hand, became even angrier. Now it wasn't just jealousy, it was hate. Joseph, however, remained pure of heart. He didn't use his dreams to exalt himself, but simply shared what God showed him. He didn't understand everything at the time, but he was being prepared for something great. Little did he know that these dreams were the key to a destiny that would change the history of an entire nation. At that time, however, he was still just a boy with a colorful tunic, eyes full of hope, and dreams that seemed impossible, but that were about to come true in a surprising way. The atmosphere between Joseph and his brothers grew more tense with each passing day. The dreams he had shared seemed to have set fire to an already dry field. His brothers looked at him with bitter eyes. They no longer saw Joseph as a brother. They saw him as a threat, a daily reminder of their own rejection. And in their hearts, jealousy turned to resentment, and resentment turned to a plan of destruction. One day, Jacob, trusting as always in his favorite son, asked Joseph to go to the field where his brothers were tending their flocks. It was a long walk from Hebron to Shechem and then to Dothan. Even so, Joseph went willingly. Obedient and responsible, he never imagined that this trip would completely change his life. As he approached, the brothers saw him from afar. Perhaps it was his colorful tunic fluttering in the desert wind that gave him away. But upon recognizing him, they didn't hesitate. They began whispering among themselves, "Here comes the dreamer. Let's kill him. Let's throw him into a well and say a wild animal ate him. Then we'll see what will become of your dreams." Their hearts were hardened. They were no longer just hurt. They were dominated by envy. But in the midst of that plot, one of the brothers, Reuben, the oldest, tried to avoid the worst. He said, "Let us not kill him. Let us not shed blood. Let us throw him alive into a cistern here in the desert, but do not touch him." Reuben had a secret plan to return later and rescue Joseph, taking him back to his father. And so they did. When Joseph arrived, happy, tired from the walk, perhaps expecting a hug or some kind of welcome, he was surprised by the violence. His own brothers, they grabbed him, tore his colorful tunic, symbol of the father's love, and threw him into a cistern dry and cold, no water, no way out. Imagine the despair, the fear, the pain of being betrayed by the one who was supposed to protect you. The dark silence of the well contrasted with the scream trapped in Jose's heart. And do you know what the brothers did right after? They sat down to eat, as if nothing had happened. While they were eating, they saw a caravan approaching in the distance. They were Ishmaelites, merchants traveling to Egypt. They carried spices and perfumes. It was then that Judah, another brother, had a cruel but profitable idea. What good will it do us if we kill our brother? Let us sell him to these Ishmaelites. Then we will not touch him directly. After all, he is our brother. And so it was done. Joseph, to 17 years old, was sold as a slave by 20 silver coins, a small price for such a precious soul. They watched as their brother was led away bound, slowly disappearing into the desert horizon. And then they decided to devise another lie. They slaughtered a goat, stained Joseph's tunic with its blood, and took it to their father, Jacob. "We found this in the field. See if it's your son's tunic." Jacob, seeing the torn and bloody cloth, cried out in agony. His heart broke. He tore his clothes and wept bitterly, believing that Joseph had been devoured by a wild beast. No one could comfort him. Jacob said, "I will go down to the grave, weeping for my son." Meanwhile, Joseph was taken to an unknown destination, chained, tired, betrayed, but not abandoned, because the God of the dreams he had was still with him, and God's plans would not be frustrated. Imagine the scene. A young Hebrew, just 17 years old, chained, his feet bruised from the long desert trek, being led by a caravan of merchants. The scorching Middle Eastern sun burned his skin, and the desert dust clung to his tear-stained face. Joseph had lost everything: his freedom, his home, his father, his tunic, and, in human eyes, even his future. He was going to one of the largest and most feared empires of the time, Egypt, land of pharaohs, armies, pagan gods, pyramids, and slaves. It was a powerful, organized civilization, but also cruel to foreigners. And now, Joseph was just another name on a list of slaves. Upon arriving in Egypt, Joseph was taken to the slave market. Men were valued like commodities: teeth, muscles, stamina. Everyone watched, negotiated, and discussed prices as if they were buying cattle. It was there that Potiphar, an important official of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, noticed Joseph. Perhaps he saw something different in this young man. Perhaps his eyes showed courage, or his posture, even when injured, revealed dignity. The fact is that Potiphar bought him and took him to his house. Joseph was now a slave, but there was something no one could see, something no whip could take away, something that could not be bought or sold. God was with him. The Bible is clear in saying the Lord was with Joseph, and he was successful in everything he did. Genesis 39:2. In Potiphar's house, Joseph didn't rebel. He didn't grumble. He worked with excellence. He cared for his duties with dedication. He was honest, upright, and respectful, and Potiphar began to notice this. He saw that everything Joseph touched prospered. The farm grew, production increased. There was peace, prosperity, and Potiphar understood that there was something special about this young Hebrew. It was then that Potiphar made a bold decision. He appointed Joseph as administrator of your entire home. Joseph now took care of everything: fields, servants, finances, supplies. The blessing that had been upon Joseph extended to the entire household of Potiphar. The biblical text says, "Ever since Potiphar made him administrator, the Lord blessed his house because of Joseph." And Joseph grew up, without a tunic, without a family, without a social position, but filled with the presence of God. But even in the midst of prosperity, a new test was about to emerge, the greatest he would face yet, because when the enemy can't destroy you with pain, he tries to bring you down with temptations. Joseph was now a trusted man. Within Potiphar's household, he rose quickly. What began as a servant position turned into leadership. Potiphar trusted Joseph so much that handed everything over to you, literally everything. He only cared about the bread he ate. This shows the level of responsibility Joseph carried and how worthy he was of that trust. But while everything seemed to be going well on the outside of Joseph's life, something began to form in the shadows. A trap that would test your heart, your character, and your faith. The Bible describes Joseph as handsome in appearance and beautiful in face. He attracted attention, even as a slave, and someone began to look at him with eyes that were not pure. Potiphar's wife began to desire Joseph. The sacred text says that she cast her eyes upon him. She saw him working, coming and going, coordinating the servants, taking excellent care of the house, and this awakened a forbidden desire in her. One day she was direct. "Lie with me." Yes, that's how it was. She didn't beat around the bush. And then Joseph, a young foreigner, alone, with no one to look out for him, he could have given in. He could have said, "No one will know." But his response was remarkable, one of the strongest statements of integrity in the entire Bible. "My master trusted me. He did not forbid me anything, except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" Do you see? For Joseph, sin was not just against Potiphar, was against God. Even without anyone watching, Joseph knew that God saw everything. And so he fused, not one, but several times. The woman insisted day after day. It was a silent, constant persecution, but Joseph always said no, until one day no one else was in the house. It was the perfect moment for the trap. She approached, grabbed Joseph by his cloak, and once again tried to seduce him. "Lie with me." But Joseph, determined to maintain his purity and fidelity, ran away. Yes, he ran, literally. He left his cloak in her hands and hurried out of the house. Joseph's attitude was noble, but it would come at a high cost. Potiphar's wife, now wounded by pride, decided to take revenge. With Joseph's cloak in her hands, shouted, called the servants and lied, saying that he had tried to abuse her. Later, she told the same lie to Potiphar. And what did he do? Even without investigating, got angry and threw Joseph in prison, in a dark, damp and dirty dungeon, a place reserved for the king's prisoners. It seems unfair, doesn't it? Joseph refused to sin, remained pure, remained faithful, and yet he was punished like a criminal. But once again, Scripture shows us something surprising. The Lord was with Joseph and showed him kindness and gave him favor in the eyes of the chief jailer. Genesis 39:21. Even in the darkness of an Egyptian cell, God was still writing Joseph's story, and what seemed like the end was in fact the beginning of something even greater. After everything he had been through, the betrayal of his brothers, his sale into slavery, the separation from his family and homeland, Joseph finally seemed to be finding a place of stability. In Potiphar's house, he had earned respect, responsibility, and even a certain authority. Everything he touched prospered. God's blessing was with him. But it was precisely in this scenario of apparent tranquility that the hardest and most silent ordeal of his youth, a temptation that came not with chains or swords, but with sweet words, malicious insistence, and the weight of loneliness. Potiphar's wife watched him daily, and the more Joseph resisted, the more she insisted. She surrounded him with words, with looks, with opportunities. The Bible says this happened day after day, Genesis 39:10. It wasn't an isolated incident. It was a constant battle, daily. And here's something important. Jose was young, far from home, with no one to protect him or keep him accountable. But even so, he chose to fear God. How many people in that situation would have given in? They might have thought, I'm just a slave. I have no future, I have no one. What's the harm in giving in? But Joseph had something inside him that no one could take away, a heart committed to God, even when no one else was looking. One day, however, the pressure reached its breaking. In point, the house was empty, no servants were around. Potiphar's wife approached Joseph aggressively. She grabbed him by the garment and repeated urgently, "Sleep with me!" Joseph knew that to stay would be to fall, and so, hurrying away, he left his cloak in her hands and ran. Yes, he fled from sin, and that was an act of courage, because sometimes running away is the greatest proof of strength anyone can demonstrate. But the story didn't end there. With her cloak in hand and her pride wounded, the woman decided to turn the tables. She screamed. She made a fuss. She called the servants. She said Joseph had tried to attack her. She created a completely false story, but with evidence in hand. His cloak, the only thing she needed to make her lie convincing. When Potiphar arrived home, she repeated the story. Potiphar, furious and perhaps also concerned for his reputation, sent Jose to prison, not just any prison, but the jail where the king's prisoners were kept. Now think for a moment. Joseph was arrested for doing the right thing. He could have avoided prison if he had given in to sin, but he chose to be faithful to God, even if it meant descending even deeper. And here is one of the most profound lessons from this story. Faithfulness doesn't always bring immediate rewards. Sometimes it takes us to dark places, but God is there too, and the Bible is clear. But the Lord was with Joseph in prison, and he showed him mercy. Genesis 39:21. In prison, Joseph was once again noticed. The jailer, like Potiphar before him, saw something special in him. God gave Joseph favor even there. He began caring for the other inmates, taking on responsibilities even behind bars. It's impressive. Jose, even though he was wronged, did not give in to victimhood. He served, he helped, he remained faithful. Even at rock bottom, God continued to shape that young man for something much greater. The dream wasn't over. He was just going through another stage of preparation. Imagine the cold stone, the musty smell, the clang of chains and bars closing behind you, the muffled sound of moans, pleas, and lost voices echoing between damp walls. This was Jose's new home. Unjustly condemned, separated from everything and everyone, Joseph was thrown into the king's prison, a place where the most sensitive or politically sensitive prisoners were held. It wasn't just an ordinary dungeon. It was a place of oblivion, where many entered but few left. But something surprising happens here. God has not forgotten him. The Bible says with firmness and comfort, the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the eyes of the jailer. Genesis 39:21. Even there, in the most adverse environment, Joseph maintained his essence. He didn't let prison get to him. He remained faithful, upright, hardworking, and respectful. The jailer, observing his behavior, soon recognized something different about this man, and as had happened with Potiphar, gave Jose responsibilities within the prison. Yes, Joseph became responsible for the other prisoners. He, who had been a prisoner, now cared for others. Everything that happened under his care went well, for the Lord made everything Joseph touched prosper. The Bible repeats, "The Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper." Genesis 39:23. This is where we see a powerful truth. No matter where you are, if God is with you, even a prison can become a training ground. Joseph wasn't in the palace, but he was being molded into a leader. He wasn't surrounded by riches, but he was learning to deal with people, with crises, with suffering. Prison, which seemed like an end, was actually a divine school. While the other prisoners gave in to despair, Joseph kept his gaze steady. He served, cared, observed. And it was in this context that God began to move the threads of destiny. Something was about to happen. Something that would come not as an immediate answer, but as consequence of his fidelity and patience. Joseph didn't know how long he would be there. He didn't know when or how his story would change, but even in the darkness, he trusted. And that was all God needed to take him to the next level. The sky was silent, but God was working behind the scenes, because sometimes the greatest miracles begin in the place where no one wants to be. Time in prison was no longer new to Joseph. He had learned to live there amidst groans and chains. He cared for the other inmates with dedication and compassion. There was no throne, no robe, but there was a God who remained with him. And it was in this somber environment that two very important men ended up in the same cell. They were no ordinary prisoners. They were Pharaoh's own officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. They served directly under the king of Egypt. The cupbearer was responsible for everything the Pharaoh drank. His position was one of utmost trust. The baker, in turn, prepared the royal food. But something happened. In the palace, the Bible says that the Pharaoh became angry with both of them and sent them to prison, exactly where Joseph was. Now stop and think. What seemed like just another routine day in prison was in fact a strategic move of God. Because when God wants to fulfill a plan, he moves people, overturns thrones, shakes prisons, and everything starts to fall into place. Joseph was entrusted with the care of these two officers. And one day he noticed that both of them had downcast faces. They had had strange dreams, mysterious, and they were troubled by their inability to understand their meaning. At that time, dreams were taken very seriously, especially in Egypt, a land that valued signs, omens, and spiritual revelations. Joseph, with sensitivity and compassion, asks, "Why do you guys look so sad today?" They answer, "We had a dream, but there is no one who can interpret it." And here Joseph does something surprising. Even in the midst of his pain, even forgotten in prison, he didn't forget who he is. He remembers the God who sustains him and says, "Interpretations belong to God. Tell me your dreams." The chief cupbearer was the first. He says, "In my dream, there was a vine with 3 branches. It budded, blossomed, and bore clusters of ripe grapes. I pressed the grapes into Pharaoh's cup and gave it to him." Joseph listens and, with divine wisdom, responds, "The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will call you back and restore you to your position. You will once again serve the cup to the king." Imagine the cupbearer's relief. It was good news. He breathed easier, and Joseph, full of hope, made just one request. "Remember me when you are well. Speak to Pharaoh about me. It was not my fault that I was thrown here. I am innocent." The baker, upon hearing his friend's good news, was excited, and then he told his dream. "I had 3 baskets of bread on my head. In the top basket was all kinds of food for Pharaoh, but the birds ate it." Jose listens and his expression changes. With regret, he responds, "The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will take your head and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh." The word was harsh, but true. 3 days later, it was Pharaoh's birthday. As was customary, he held a grand banquet and sent for the 2 officials, and it all happened exactly as Joseph had said. The cupbearer was restored to his position, and the baker was executed. Now everything seemed to be falling into place. Joseph must have been hopeful. Finally, someone with access to Pharaoh knew him. He must have thought, "Now my time has come. He will remember me. He will get me out of here." But the Bible ends this chapter with a painful sentence. But the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. Genesis 40:23. 2 years have passed. 2 long years of silence, of waiting, of forgetting. But God never forgets a faithful son. And while Joseph waited in the dark, God was preparing the exact moment to exalt him. Because when God wants to lift you up, he does not depend on the memory of men. He moves heaven and earth for you. After interpreting the dreams of the butler and the baker, Joseph hoped that his deliverance was near. After all, the chief butler had been restored to his position of trust with Pharaoh, and Joseph had humbly asked, "Remember me when you are well, and tell Pharaoh about me." But to his surprise and pain, the cupbearer simply forgot about Jose. Not just for a few days, but for 2 long years. Imagine how Joseph felt during this period, 2 years living in the shadows, in silence, in waiting. A time when hope could easily be extinguished, when doubt and bitterness could try to dominate the heart. But Joseph did not give in to discouragement. He remained steadfast in his faith and integrity. The Bible does not record him murmuring or complaining. There is no record of him openly questioning God. He continued serving and caring for the prisoners with the same dedication and trust as always. This time of waiting was also a period of maturation. Joseph learned that faithfulness to God does not depend on circumstances, nor the speed with which our requests are answered. He learned to trust even when silence seemed to be the only answer. This human neglect, which might seem unfair, was actually part of the divine plan. God was preparing Joseph for an even greater moment, something that would not come until the right time. 2 years had passed since Joseph interpreted the dreams of the cupbearer and the baker, and he was still imprisoned. But then something extraordinary happened. Pharaoh himself, the king of Egypt, began to have disturbing dreams. Dreams no one could understand. Imagine what was going through the powerful ruler's mind. He was a man accustomed to controlling everything, to ordering, to making the impossible happen. But now, something was making him restless, worried, and without peace. In Pharaoh's dreams, he saw something incredible and frightening at the same time. First, 7 fat, beautiful cows emerged from the Nile River and grazed peacefully. Soon after, 7 skinny, ugly cows emerged from the same river and devoured the fat cows. Then he dreamed of 7 full golden ears of wheat, followed by 7 thin ears of wheat, scorched by the desert wind, which consumed the full ears. Pharaoh woke in terror, but none of Egypt's wise men and magicians could explain the meaning of his dreams. They only increased his anguish. At that moment, the chief cupbearer, who had been restored to his post, remembered Joseph, the young Hebrew who had interpreted his dreams in prison. So he told Pharaoh about Joseph and his unusual ability to interpret dreams. Pharaoh sent for Joseph immediately. Imagine the scene. The young man, still imprisoned, was taken from his cell, dressed in fine clothes, and taken to the king's palace. It was the turning point in his life, the culmination of years of patience and faithfulness. When Joseph entered Pharaoh's presence, he wasn't puffed up with pride. He humbly made it clear that the interpretation of dreams came from God, not him. He said, "Pharaoh's dreams are a message from God, revealing what is to come." Joseph then explained that the 7 years of fat cows and full ears of grain represented 7 years of great plenty in Egypt. The 7 lean cows and the burnt ears of grain represented 7 years of severe famine that would come soon after. And it was not just any famine. Joseph warned that this famine would not only be in Egypt, but in all the surrounding lands, and that immediate preparations should be made to store food for the years of plenty. Pharaoh, impressed by Joseph's wisdom and recognizing the hand of God in that interpretation, made a historic decision. Who can find someone like this man in whom is the Spirit of God? And so, Joseph was elevated to a position of enormous authority. Pharaoh himself appointed him the second most powerful man in Egypt, charged with overseeing the collection and storage of food during years of plenty to face future famine. It was the realization of a dream that had seemed impossible years before. The young man sold into slavery now ruled an empire. After receiving such an immense responsibility from Pharaoh, Joseph underwent a stunning transformation. Not only in his status, but in his life and mission. He became the governor of Egypt, the second most powerful authority after the Pharaoh himself. To this end, the king gave him a royal robe and a signet ring, and placed him in a luxurious chariot. Joseph was no longer a young slave or prisoner, but a leader recognized throughout the land. His first mission was clear: to oversee food storage during the 7 years of plenty. Egypt, under his direction, prepared enormous granaries, storing grain, wheat, and everything needed for the hard times ahead. Joseph demonstrated extraordinary administrative wisdom. He organized the people, coordinated the harvests, and established an efficient system to ensure nothing went to waste. The Egyptian people respected him and recognized that God was with him. And when the 7 years of famine arrived, the land began to suffer. Many neighboring countries suffered famine, but Egypt had food stored away, thanks to Joseph's foresight and leadership. Because of this crisis, many came to Egypt in search of food, including Joseph's own brothers, who were far from imagining that this powerful governor was the brother they had sold years before. Joseph saw his brothers approaching, hungry and desperate, and the story was about to take a surprising new turn. Imagine the scene. Joseph's brothers, hungry and desperate, crossed the arid lands in search of food for their families. Unbeknownst to them, they're about to step foot in the same territory where Joseph, their betrayed brother, now rules as the second most powerful man in Egypt. They arrived in Egypt without imagining that this man in colorful robes, who wore royal clothes and commanded large granaries, was exactly the brother they had sold into slavery so many years ago. Joseph recognized them immediately, but they didn't recognize him back. The time, the clothes, the position, everything had changed. The brothers were before a ruler, and Joseph was discreet, hiding his identity. Instead of revealing himself immediately, Joseph decided to test his brothers. He wanted to see if they had changed, if they felt remorse, if they recognized the evil they had done. It was a delicate game full of pent-up emotion. First, he accused them of being spies, a way to test them. Joseph kept them under surveillance, demanding that one of them remain as a hostage, while the others returned with their younger brother Benjamin, to prove that they were not lying. This decision caused great anguish among the brothers, who were torn between fear and hope. Joseph wanted to see if they were still the same selfish men of the past, or if they had changed. During this reunion, Joseph observed the brothers' interactions, the words they spoke, and the way they cared for one another. The fact that they protected Benjamin so zealously touched his heart deeply. Still, Joseph remained steadfast, hiding his identity, leaving them to suffer the anxiety of separation and confrontation. But deep down, her heart fought against the desire to reveal herself, to embrace them and forgive them. It was an internal battle between the justice that demanded explanations and the love that yearned for reunion. This part of the story is a true human drama, showing how forgiveness is difficult but liberating, and how God can use even suffering to transform lives and reunite families. After Joseph's brothers brought the news that their father Jacob was alive and that they had a younger brother, Benjamin, Joseph invited them to return to Egypt, but with one very serious condition. They must bring Benjamin with them. This decision was not made lightly. Joseph knew that Benjamin was his mother Rachel's most beloved son and the brother he held dear. Putting Benjamin at risk was, for Joseph, a definitive test. Why was this test so important? Because years ago, Joseph had been betrayed, sold, and abandoned by these same brothers. Now he needed to know if they had changed, if they were men of character, capable of caring for one another, and if they were truly repentant. Upon arriving in Egypt, Joseph continued to conceal his identity. He acted as a generous host, offering food, drink, and comfort. During the banquet, however, Joseph ordered his servants to place the silver cup, a valuable object, inside Benjamin's sack. When the brothers left the next day, Joseph sent his servants to pursue them and accuse them of theft, claiming the cup had been stolen. Tensions mounted. The possibility of losing Benjamin forever terrified the brothers. But here's the point Joseph was trying to make. He wanted to see their reaction to the danger of losing their younger brother. And that's when the shift became clear. Judah, the eldest brother and leader of the group, gave a moving testimony before Joseph, who was still in hiding, taking responsibility and offering to be imprisoned in Benjamin's place. He recounted how devastated his father Jacob would be if he lost Benjamin, as he was his only remaining son by his beloved Rachel. This moment revealed the brothers' maturity. They were now united, caring for each other, capable of sacrificing themselves to protect the most vulnerable. Joseph could no longer contain his emotion. He ordered everyone to leave and finally revealed himself to his brothers, saying, "I am Joseph, your brother, the one you sold into Egypt." The surprise was immense, and the brothers were terrified, afraid that Joseph would avenge them for their years of suffering. But Joseph reassured them with words of forgiveness and love. "Do not take revenge, nor bear a grudge against yourselves, for God sent me before you to preserve life." This reconciliation marked the beginning of a new phase for Jose and his family, where forgiveness and restoration prevailed over the painful past. After the emotional revelation and forgiveness between Joseph and his brothers, the long-awaited moment arrived, the reunion with the patriarch Jacob, his beloved father. Imagine the scene. Jacob, now elderly, had been living for years with the pain of Joseph's loss, believing his most beloved son had died. His heart was heavy, marked by a deep grief that never fully healed. Then one day his sons return with incredible news. Joseph is alive. And not only that, he is a powerful authority in Egypt, able to provide for the entire family. Jacob couldn't believe it. His eyes filled with tears and his heart filled with hope. He prepared for the journey to Egypt, taking his entire family and the few possessions they had left. When he finally arrived, Jacob found Joseph, no longer a lost boy, but a strong, wise man filled with God's grace. The Bible describes this moment movingly. Jacob embraced Joseph and wept bitterly while Joseph comforted him. This reunion was not just a family reunion, but a testament to the power of faith and forgiveness. Jacob recognized that even the hardships and betrayals had served to fulfill a greater divine purpose. Joseph, with humility and love, explained that everything that happened was in God's hands to save lives during the difficult times that were yet to come. The family settled in Egypt, living under Joseph's protection, where they grew and prospered. Joseph's dream, which began with a colorful robe and was marked by suffering, now became reality, a promise fulfilled. After so many years of struggle, suffering, trials, and victories, Joseph was not only a man who changed his own life, but someone whose legacy echoes to this day as a powerful example for all generations. By reuniting his family in Egypt, Joseph not only saved his closest relatives, but also played a pivotal role in the history of an entire nation. The famine that struck the region spared no one, but thanks to Joseph's wisdom and planning, Egypt became a refuge for many surrounding peoples who came seeking food and shelter. More than an efficient administrator, Joseph was an instrument of God in fulfilling a much greater plan, which places him among the most remarkable characters in the Bible. As governor of Egypt, Joseph demonstrated extraordinary leadership, marked by prudence, vision, and justice. He knew how to marshal resources, plan for the future, and act with mercy, always keeping in mind the well-being of the people, even those who had once deeply hurt him. His administrative skill and wise heart earned him respect not only from the Pharaoh, but throughout Egypt, turning a crisis into an opportunity. Perhaps Joseph's greatest legacy lies in the power of forgiveness. He could have taken revenge on the brothers who sold him, but he chose a different path, one of love, mercy, and restoration. When Joseph revealed himself to his brothers, he neither accused nor humiliated them. Instead, he embraced them, comforted them, and acknowledged God's hand in the entire story, saying, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring about what is happening this day." Genesis 50:20. This transformative forgiveness serves as an example for us all. Even in the midst of the greatest pain, it is possible to choose peace, reconciliation, and hope. Joseph's story also teaches us the importance of trusting in God's providence, even when all seems lost. From being sold by his brothers to his years in prison, Joseph never lost faith. He believed God was in control, even when he couldn't see the way clearly. And that trust was rewarded in a grand way, as God used every difficult moment to prepare Joseph for a mission that would save many. Besides saving his family from famine, Joseph also contributed to the growth of the nation of Israel. By leading his father and brothers to Egypt, he ensured that the people would not succumb to famine and would have a place to grow and multiply. This event was fundamental to the formation of the chosen people and to later events in the Bible, including the Exodus, when Joseph's descendants left Egypt for the Promised Land. Joseph's story is not just an ancient tale, it is a timeless testimony that God is present in every stage of our lives, guiding us with love and wisdom to fulfill his purpose for us. And so we conclude this incredible journey through the life of Joseph, a man who, despite being sold into slavery and unjustly imprisoned, became an instrument of God to save a nation. Did this story of Joseph touch your heart? Did it make you reflect on faith, perseverance, and forgiveness? Then I invite you to leave your like below. Like this video so more people can learn about this incredible example of trust in God that spans centuries. And don't forget, share in the comments what you learned from Joseph's life, or perhaps a life-changing experience of faith. Your story can inspire and strengthen others. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. See you in the next video with more stories that uplift and transform. May God bless you and your families.